Okay, I'm going to try this again. At about a month ago, I did my first one of these things that I'm going to call love speeches because it's the opposite of hate speech. Get it? Yeah, I'm still trying to workshop that name. But anyway, I just finished going live for about 3 minutes on TikTok, and I got kicked off somehow. I don't know why. They said it was a problem with the device. Let's hope that it doesn't happen again because I really don't want to have to start this again because I really hate doing that. Anyway, so what did I talk about last month? I talked about how no human being is trash. Believe me, I got tested on that throughout the week after and the month after. So hey, today I don't think I'm gonna teach any other lesson that honestly I don't think you already know. So here's the thing. Can we end racism in our lifetime? That's the question I want to pose to you today. And I'm going to talk about what we need to do in order to do this and what kind of mindset we need to have. So let's not. Now, I feel like we're at an interesting point in our history, and I believe that we are really slowly becoming what a lot of people refer to as woke. And I like this term, honestly. I think it's a decent term to describe who we are. But honestly, it's been a slow wake-up call, hasn't it? I mean, it's like the alerts go off, or the alarm goes off, we hit the snooze button, it goes off again however many minutes later, we hit it again, and you get what I'm trying to say. This has been a slow journey because we just didn't. It's not like we realized that we were prejudiced and we just said, oh, I guess we better not do that anymore. You know, it'd be like, it was kind of like when people found out asbestos is cancer causing. I think we basically just said, oh, shoot, better not do that. But in this case, oh man, it has been a slow climb. After all, the Civil Rights Act was around like 60 years ago, and that gave black people the right to vote. Most people say that was definitely a big around the corner, and that was in 1964. Women, they didn't get to vote until around the 20s, right? That was like 100 years ago that women could actually vote. And we've had women since the beginning of time, for crying out loud. That's just crazy. And then we didn't end slavery until like 1863, and that was like 150 years ago at, the end of Civil War. And I want to talk about the Civil War a bit, because honestly, it's that one period that we associate it being a war over slaves. But I think most just attribute it to the North and South really fighting over their different lifestyles. There were several causes to this war. The South was proud of its rural heritage, like its cotton crop. And the North was embracing industry and the idea of free states. You just didn't want to have slaves around. And new advancements like the cotton gin. And yes, this simple invention, well, relatively simple, that Eli Whitney created was a machine that could just remove seeds from cotton. And it was simply cheaper and easier than importing several hundred workers from another continent by force. So gradually, I think we just found that slavery was just an inefficient method. So we just abandoned it. And now this is not to underappreciate the efforts of abolitionists who did go against a lot of societal norms at great cost in order to bring about the Emancipation Proclamation. These are sacrifices that are not in vain. I definitely want to praise that, because honestly, it was people that stepped forward and said enough, which caused slavery to be ended, honestly. But back to our present day, I'm not certain what it is about the last few decades that has caused us to basically just step forward and just go enough. And we're just, when it comes to not making anyone, anywhere, feel inferior in any way, we suddenly have got this great urge to be these type of heroes. And honestly, I think that's a credit to our race. It's a credit to our race that we haven't completed this. It feels like this should have been the first step, but it's starting to become our last because of just how much atrocity we've done due to bigotry and hatred and prejudice over the decades, centuries, and millennia. I just think we're just getting tired of upper classes treating lower classes like dirt, really. There's just something inside of us now that just goes like, that's not fair. And we've been told in our life to respond with, hey, life's not fair, and move on. But it is difficult to move on when one is still in shackles, isn't it? Anyway, so it's movements like the hashtag #MeToo, which shows that we just won't take it anymore. I feel like before, maybe there was a time where we lived like we were on a chessboard and we had kings and queens and rooks, bishops and knights and pawns. And we just don't want that classification anymore. It just makes a lot of sense. We want to be like, well, checkers. We want each piece to have the same amount of movement and attacking power as the other. Attacking power, okay. Maybe that was a bad analogy to make, but you see what I'm saying. Each of them have the same amount of ability to do what they can do. So I think that's just it's just what we're doing. And I believe we're at the point where we are really saying, like, geez, not only do we need to shed racism, we're beginning to acknowledge it as one of the last remaining moral evils that we need to just shed off us in order to advance as a species. So there's one way to get rid of racism, and that is a way that I think we already have. Simply just make it illegal. Now, for the most part, there are laws in case to keep people from being discouraged from applying to jobs or to join certain groups due to the basis of gender or gender preference or skin color, nationality, the whole gamut. But essentially, I'm talking like a complete crackdown on any group that has any racist intent in its motives. And hey, that would mean like, you know how like we have this like war on terror thing going after 9/11? Basically that, but groups that are essentially people that have racism in their credo, or they have it, or they are proud racists. We go after them, and then we imprison them, or we definitely give them some sort of punishment of some type. You hear what I'm saying here? I'm going to say this. I'm going to talk about something a little bit different now. There are some drugs that are still illegal. And a while ago, when we saw that drugs were a problem, we simply just made them illegal. That never meant problem solved. It still didn't stop the drugs from getting to the addicts. In fact, they've been illegal for a long time. And even before the age of the internet, and even before some of the advancements that we have technologically, it was still a multi-billion-dollar business and still remains that way. So if we want to make something illegal, it's just not that those who want this thing aren't just going to go, oh, shucks, I guess I'm going to have to do something else. No, they'll work above the law to make sure that they'll get what they want, that to essentially they believe that they have a higher law and they can go against that law that's being passed against that which they like. So, like illegal drugs or like that, are racist groups always going to be with us? I certainly hope not. When I was in high school, I saw this documentary on the KKK. And this documentary was decades old. So for all I know, there could be, the KKK might not believe this anymore, but honestly, I mean, hey, there was this idea that essentially, that explained in this documentary, that the KKK saw that one day there would be a great war of the races. And I don't know if they call it great, but a war of the races. Essentially, it's very frightening, this idea that one day they're going to believe that it's going to come down to us versus them. And now the way they showed it on this documentary, they showed people in the KKK, older people teaching the younger people, saying things like, and I'll be fighting alongside of you. And implying that this war of the races was going to be coming in their own lifetime. Oh, man. Stuff like that is just downright scary. Now, personally, if there is a war on the racists, I think we all know that it's going to be the racists who start it, okay? That's going to be how that's going to be. to be honest, I actually think that a lot of the races that are getting trounced upon by whites, um, I'm not trying to put any ideas in anyone's head, but honestly, when I see about these protests and stuff like that, sometimes I wonder like why these protests aren't even more fierce than considering how they have been treated, and it's really sad. Now, I'm not certain what state that the racist organizations in the United States are, or the rest of the world. Some of you might remember the film Borat. This film, released in 2005, it showed us this interesting character that Sacha Baron Cohen essentially created, who had a funny accent and would go around pretending he was from another country. And I've heard so many different versions of this about how this film was done. Essentially, like there'd be hidden cameras, or perhaps he'd have a film crew following him, and he would play as Borat in this character, and he would ask all types of questions, and essentially they would film what would happen, and then I guess those people signed consent forms or something like that. I hope they did. I mean, for crying out loud, I'm pretty sure that's kind of, you don't want that kind of ambush TV or Truman Show type mentality. So what was interesting about the original film was how far he would take this character and ask questions. Like he went to a gun store and basically asked, like, do you have a gun that could kill a Jew? And of course, and the gun store owner just went, oh yeah, we've got several. And I don't know if that was the guy playing or playing along. I don't really know. But it was a very odd thing, because I felt that in the 90s we got very into multiculturalism. We got this idea that, hey, we are becoming more woke as a society. And then in the Borat film, we showed like, nope, we're just as bigoted as you thought that we are. And so it's interesting that in the 2005 Borat film, it feels like these people are treated as in like they are the fringe of society, that these are the people that are dying out. And I think we want to believe that. I think part of us just wants to believe that any racists or any racist groups are dying, and that they won't be a problem anymore, and that all we need is just a few more decades or a lifetime, and they just won't be a problem anymore. This problem will be solved. Now, the sequel to Borat, shot 15 years later, showed that such practices were still alive and well, that we had cases of bigotry and prejudice that were also still going on, and especially in the light of the election of Donald Trump. It feels like the right-wing's pendulum had just swung back the other way, and now there are groups who insist on racist credos that actually believe they should be part of the mainstream of America. And the summer of 2020 brought a lot of racial tension going, specifically with the Black Lives Matter movement, which definitely frightens a lot of people. Now, but Black Lives Matter and Me Too movement is an honestly predictable backlash. Like I said before, we are becoming more woke, and I think more people are waking up to the fact that institutionalized racism, although outlawed, it still exists in some form. There is still there. The problem is systemic. We're trying to make strides of it, but the progress is slow. And it shouldn't be. And honestly, as I've said before, I found the way that Black Americans are treated in this country are really appalling. But here's the thing. I don't really see it, honestly. Because as someone who's white, I get to live my life, and the other white people don't tell me how bad they treat the others. And it's the definition of white privilege, and sadly I have it. Now, I have a friend who is African, and he tells me that he has to act a certain way in front of white people. And I don't really want to be a part of a society that you have to pretend to fit in. I feel like if we really are trying to be this woke, everybody needs to be themselves. I recently watched an episode of a television show called The Last OG. If you're not familiar with the show, Tracy Morgan plays a man who's been released from a long prison sentence into Brooklyn, where he has to face the gentrification as well as how his life has changed, because he's literally trying to be a better person, but he has so much trying to force him back into his old lifestyle, what got him into prison in the first place. Now, there's one episode they did which was I want to say parody, but maybe it was more of an homage to the film Do the Right Thing, the Spike Lee film from 1989, I think. It might have been 1988, I'm not sure. But if you haven't seen this film, it features white police officers choking a black man to death during some civil unrest. And when I saw this, I found out this episode took place a year before the George Floyd case. And when I saw it, I was on my break at work, and I couldn't take it. I wanted to cry, because it was just, I was seeing something from a film done 30 years ago happening again on a television show, and yet the message was still relevant. That we haven't learned. I kind of felt like, I don't know, it would be like if, I don't know, if you saw like a 15-year-old who didn't know how to read or something like that. It's like, how did you miss this lesson? How did you, it feels like that. I mean, you ever have a problem that just sticks around longer than it should, and you just go like, is this still a problem? Are we still doing this? And, yeah, we are. The issue is systemic. There's still people that are taught from the crib that certain types of people are inferior by that nature. And I talked about how non-true this is. No person is trash. No person is like this. We still do this, though. There are still groups that still, from the cradle, teach their children this value. I think the greatest thing, honestly, the greatest tragedy that I think the human race has is not that we can learn quickly, but that we cannot unlearn quickly. So I remember seeing this news story again, and I think it was actually in my high school, because back then apartheid in South Africa was an issue. It probably still is an issue, because honestly, we're still doing this, right? Now, I'm okay, honestly, please scratch from the record that I'm uninformed about those things. I will be very honest with that. Anyway, this was back in the 80s, and they showed this guy, this apartheid supporter, a white man, reading from the Bible in the book of Genesis. He gets to that section where God says, "Let there be light." And he explains to the reporters that the takeaway is this. You see, God made the light, and it was because something dark had to exist then that he had to make the light. The implication is that the dark is the inferior thing. Light has to be made to go against it. And I believe he's implying that darker-skinned people are essentially the humanified form of that. I did not explain that very well, but essentially, you get what I'm saying. You're taking a scripture out of context to support racism, for crying out loud. You're taking the Bible, for crying out loud, and supporting racism. Now, if you're teaching someone about God and ultimate morality, and and racism is a part of this doctrine, how are you going to get someone to walk out of that racism without thinking they are completely walking out of their faith? That's the question. Well, the answer is, of course, difficult. The answer is that other person has to see there's a better way. If we see a creed as a certain set of laws, then we need to understand that the removal of some of these laws might be necessary to keep that credo strong. Hear what I'm saying on that? This happened to me, as I was once part of an organization that supported things that I consider pretty heinous to support. I'm not going to get into that. I think I might have even said that in the last thing about one of these days. Maybe I'll do this in a season finale or something like that, where I'm going to talk about this. And believe me, I think I am working up to it. I'm going to talk about that one day, about how when I was a part of this group, I didn't see what I was doing was wrong. I simply thought it was just, in fact, I thought it was morally right, and that everyone else had this wrong, and that my group that I was in was somehow special and that we could do this. But it's obvious the more distance I put between me and this group that no, it doesn't work that way. So yes, it becomes necessary to make amendments and possibly amputations from what you have as your system of beliefs from time to time. Of course, there's always a danger of doing too much of this. Hear what I'm saying? And I think that's the biggest thing that people that are that don't want to change do. They basically say like, well, if you start changing this and changing this, eventually you're going to be changing the whole dang thing and you're going to throw the whole thing out. Well, if the whole dang thing is leading to a lot of people getting hurt, yes, you better throw that dang thing out and find something new. I'm sorry, there's no other way to say it other than that. I'm not going to sugarcoat that. And when it boils down to it, the problem is that removing racism can't really be done through legislation. Like I said before, it's like making drugs illegal. They'll find their way in. And to really, can you make someone do something and stuff like that? I had an incident. This isn't on my notes. I once did I was in Tennessee once. I was helping, I wasn't really a camp counselor, but for lack of a better term, I'll use that term. I dealt with 3 kids who, when we were roasting marshmallows on a fire, they burnt them, and they burnt them black, and they called these marshmallows the N-word marshmallows. They said this, and I couldn't believe what I was hearing, and it was like, and later on I talked to them about that, and I felt like when I was talking about it, they just kind of went, I could tell they were not really getting me. These were kids that were in the South. They were in Tennessee. They were probably raised to use that N-word, to use it to describe black people. Very sad. Those are one of the few, honestly, very few times I've really interacted with. Okay, fine. I probably am surrounded by prejudiced people being white, okay? I don't think I've ever really been prejudiced against, and honestly, I never want to experience it. But I don't want to go like, okay, that's for them. No, I want to help them out because that's just not good. So here's the thing. I think we can create laws against racism, and we should, of course. Every law, I think, has its basis in morality. I know they say you can't legislate morality, but like it or not, most of our laws have at least some sort of basis in reality. There's this idea that it's illegal to murder because you're going to remove someone from the world. You're going to make someone, the loved one, sad. And it's illegal to steal because it makes someone unjustifiably more rich and makes someone else unjustifiably more poor. There is a certain morality and a logic that has to happen here, that in order to create laws and in order to govern with laws. And none of us would have any problem using a defensive force against murderers or thieves if it meant the innocent would be more protected. So using the same energy on those who are racist would mean to unleash that type of just massive SWAT team-like crackdowns on those who are essentially ignorant. It's different it's different to fight someone who is deliberately making these choices, and then it's harder to fight someone who they don't really know any other way, really, or they've been taught that the other way is just so wrong they wouldn't even dare embrace it. So if we attempt to end racism by force, it will multiply. I think what we really need now to end racism is division. Racists need to see that there is no profit in exclusivity. There's a reason that you can help everyone. And it's sort of like how the cotton gin eventually led to the end of slavery, because it wasn't expedient to keep people as slaves anymore. The machine does the work. So I feel like there is more profit to be made for everyone if we keep everyone who is around and working with everything that they have together. And that's, I don't even know how to describe something like this, because honestly, we don't really have a system like this. I think we have a sort of a system like this, but we do not. Basically, everyone works together, and we value their cultural contributions and all other contributions they make as well. All right? And it means working with them, respecting who they are simultaneously, not treating people like trash, not treating people like everyone's got something to contribute. Everybody's here, even if they just might be an example of what not to do, they're still here. And to do this, you essentially do have to there is a limit or there is something to say about how you have to essentially say, okay, I'm going to go along with group here. And then, of course, there's the other balance where you go along with group so well, you eventually de-individualize yourself. I don't really know what the balance is of that. It's something I think about every day. It's something that I have to think about when I'm dealing with certain organizations that I know are that are not right and can do the job better. And how do we move in and how do we make changes in them? So yes, if we're willing to put down our own assertions about who is superior, and if we're willing to work together, if we're willing to understand the next culture, we're willing to understand the next group, then yeah, we would end racism in our lifetime. Heck, we could end it tomorrow. Of course, and honestly, I think it's a bit naive to say that we could just embrace this right away. I think we're slowly seeing this because we're seeing so many examples of how racism just doesn't work and is a futile and volatile system. And the only enemy I see of not having racism removed in our own lifetime are the racists who constantly cling to this idea that, no, we had it right the whole time. What we need to do is keep putting these people down, and then everything will go back to the way it was before. In other words, they can make a return and we can make America great again or something. Yeah, I went there. But did you really not expect me to? Anyway, this has been Mark Rollins, and I'm going to sign off on this now. So, anyway, I believe I actually know what my topic is going to be. Hopefully I can get to that next week instead of waiting a month on this. These things are hard to do, but I want to post them on YouTube once they get there. And anyway, I'm signing off.